ready to dive deep. Today we're tackling the art of time management, smart strategies to achieve your goals faster and successfully. So, if you're feeling like time is slipping through your fingers, this one's for you. We're going to break down the book's key ideas and see if we can spark some of those aha moments you love.
You know, what impressed me right off the bat is how this book frames time management. It's not just about squeezing more into your day. It's presented as a foundational life skill.
Yeah, like a building block for, well, for everything.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
building a house, right? You need a strong foundation. If your foundation's shaky, the whole structure's at risk.
So we're not just talking about getting more done, but getting the right things done.
Absolutely. The book contrasts the downside of core time management.
Mm.
Things like missed deadlines and burnout. With the upside, think reduced stress and better work-life balance.
I can definitely relate to that feeling of burnout when you're just trying to juggle everything without a clear plan. It's interesting, the book debunks some common myths about time management. One that stood out was this idea that being busy automatically means you're being productive.
Oh, that's a big one. You can be running around all day, but if you're not focused on the right tasks, are you really achieving anything?
So it's not about doing more, but doing what matters.
Exactly. The book really hammers home that 80-20 rule, focusing on the 20% of efforts that drive 80% of the results.
That 80-20 rule is powerful stuff. Okay, question for you. Do you think people rely too much on apps and gadgets for time management? Because the book seems to emphasize a shift in mindset as the first step, not just grabbing the latest tool.
It's a good point. Technology can be helpful, but you can get caught up in the bells and whistles without addressing the root causes. Those underlying habits and behaviors that lead to poor time management. The book stresses starting with self-awareness and discipline.
Inner game first, then the tools to support that. Makes sense. Speaking of self-awareness, the book dives into different time management styles. They describe 4 types: the planner, the procrastinator, the multitasker, and the firefighter. Now, you mentioned building a foundation earlier, so let's zero in on the planner and the procrastinator. Those two, at their extremes, can really make or break that foundation, right?
Absolutely. So the planner, at their best, is organized and proactive. But taken too far, they can become inflexible and struggle with adapting when things change. Picture someone meticulously planning every minute of their day, and then a surprise meeting pops up.
Oh, I know a few people like that. They thrive on structure, but anything unexpected throws them completely off. Then on the flip side, we have the procrastinator.
Ah, the master of last-minute heroics, thriving under pressure, yeah. But this can also lead to chronic stress and potentially sacrificing quality for speed.
I think we all have a bit of that procrastination tendency lurking within us. The book seems to say it's all about understanding our natural inclinations and finding the right strategies that work with them. Now, before we move on to prioritization, let's talk about those sneaky time wasters.
Oh, the time wasters, the bane of productivity. The book gives some very relatable examples. Endless social media scrolling, those meetings that could have been a quick email.
Yeah, like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's those little things that add up and steal so much time.
And it keeps us from focusing on the tasks that truly matter. It all comes back to that 80-20 rule, right? What are the key activities that drive your results?
Great point. So once we're clear on that, how do we figure out what to prioritize among those important tasks?
Well, the book has this brilliant analogy I love. It uses a jar filled with rocks, pebbles, and sand.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me about this jar.
Picture this. You're trying to fit all those rocks, pebbles, and sand into the jar. Now, if you start with the sand and pebbles, you'll run out of room for the big rocks. But if you prioritize the rocks, those big important things, the pebbles and sand will naturally fill in the gaps.
So it's about getting those big rocks in first, making sure they get the attention they deserve.
Exactly. From there, the book introduces the Eisenhower matrix. It's a tool for categorizing tasks based on urgency and importance.
Okay, break down this Eisenhower matrix for our listeners. How can they actually use it in their everyday lives?
Okay, so imagine you're looking at your to-do list, feeling overwhelmed. The Eisenhower matrix helps you categorize those tasks into 4 quadrants. First, you have tasks that are both urgent and important, like meeting a critical deadline or handling a crisis. Those need immediate attention.
They can't ignore stuff.
Right. Then you have tasks that are important but not urgent. These might be long-term goals, strategic planning, or even self-care activities. Crucial for your well-being and success, but they don't have that immediate deadline pressure.
Those are the things we often push aside because they don't have that due yesterday feeling, but they're crucial for long-term growth.
Exactly. Then there are tasks that are urgent but not actually important. These are often distractions or requests from others. Think about those non-critical emails or phone calls that derail your focus. The key here is to delegate or minimize these as much as possible.
So learning to say no is a superpower in time management.
Absolutely. And finally, we have the tasks that are neither urgent nor important. The true time wasters. Mindlessly scrolling or watching TV when you have other things you should be doing.
It's about getting real with ourselves and recognizing those things that aren't contributing to our goals.
Exactly. The book makes it clear that the Eisenhower matrix isn't about creating some rigid system. It's a framework for making conscious decisions about where your time goes.
So more about awareness and intentionality than blindly following rules.
Precisely. And the book mentions a couple of other methods too. The ABCDE method ranks tasks by importance, and the Ivy Lee method, a classic strategy for prioritizing your top 6 tasks each day. They all offer slightly different approaches to prioritizing, so finding what works best for you is key.
Now, before we move on to setting SMART goals, what about your personal experience with these prioritization techniques? Have you found one that you really click with?
I've played around with a few, and honestly, what works best for me is a combination. I use the Eisenhower matrix to get that big picture overview, and then the Ivy Lee method helps me narrow down to those top priorities for each day.
That makes sense. Finding your own personal system. All right, let's move on to SMART goals. This is where we start turning those vague wishes and dreams into concrete, achievable steps.
Time to get smart.
All right, break it down for us. What does SMART stand for, and how do we actually use it to set goals we're more likely to stick with?
So SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Each element is super important for setting goals that you're more likely to achieve.
Let's break down each piece of the SMART acronym. Starting with specific, what makes a goal truly specific?
A specific goal is clearly defined, no ambiguity. Instead of saying, I want to get fit, a specific goal would be, I want to lose 10 pounds to improve my health. You're stating exactly what you want to accomplish.
So it's about getting laser focused on that desired outcome.
Exactly. Next, we have measurable. A measurable goal allows you to track your progress, see if you're on track. Instead of saying, I'll exercise more, a measurable goal would be, I'll exercise for 30 minutes 4 times a week. You've got a concrete way to measure your progress.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about making it tangible and trackable.
Right. Now, achievable refers to setting goals that are realistic within your capabilities. You wouldn't set a goal to run a marathon next month if you've never run before, right?
So ambitious, but also grounded in reality.
Exactly. Next up, relevant. This means aligning your goals with your overall values and aspirations. If your long-term goal is career advancement, a relevant short-term goal might be to complete a professional certification.
Making sure those goals are actually moving you in the direction you want to go.
Precisely. And finally, time-bound means setting a deadline. This creates a sense of urgency and accountability. Instead of just saying, I'll learn a new language, you'd say, I'll be conversational in Spanish within 6 months. Having a deadline helps you stay focused and motivated.
So it's about creating a sense of urgency and commitment.
Exactly. Now, remember earlier you mentioned you're looking to level up your career. Let's apply this SMART framework to a professional goal. Let's say you want to boost your data analysis skills to open up new career opportunities. How could we make that desire into a SMART goal?
Okay, let me think it. Instead of just saying, I want to get better at data analysis, a SMART goal could be, I will complete the Google Data Analytics certification within 6 months to enhance my career prospects. It's specific, measurable, achievable, it's relevant to my career goals, and it has a clear deadline.
That's an awesome SMART goal. You've nailed it. You've clearly defined what you want to achieve, how you'll measure it, you've made sure it's achievable within a realistic time frame, it's connected to your larger career goals, and you've got a deadline to keep you accountable.
This already feels so much more manageable than just having this vague idea of wanting to improve.
Right. Breaking it down into smaller, SMART goals makes it less intimidating and more actionable. And remember, the book gives examples for all areas of life, not just career stuff.
So whether it's health, finances, relationships, personal growth, the SMART framework applies.
Absolutely. Now, before we jump into creating a time management plan, what are some things you've personally struggled with when setting goals?
Honestly, my biggest struggle is consistency. I get super motivated initially, but then life gets in the way and I lose steam. What strategies does the book offer for combating that?
That's a super common struggle, and the book has some great advice. One key strategy is to break down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps. Like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Oh, I love that.
Right. By breaking down a large, overwhelming goal into smaller chunks, it feels much less intimidating.
Makes total sense.
Hmm.
It's so easy to get paralyzed by those huge goals, like staring up at a mountain, thinking you'll never reach the top.
Exactly. Breaking it down makes the journey more manageable and allows you to celebrate those smaller victories along the way.
Those small wins are so important, they keep the momentum going. Are there other strategies you've found helpful for maintaining that consistency?
Definitely. The book also highlights the importance of routines. Maybe starting each day with a morning routine that includes exercise, planning, and a healthy breakfast. Those routines become like anchors for your day, helping you stay grounded and productive.
That makes so much sense. It's about creating those positive habits that almost become automatic, so you're not relying on willpower alone.
Exactly. Willpower is limited.
Yeah.
By establishing routines, you're setting yourself up for success.
Okay. As we move on to actually creating a time management plan, can you talk a bit more about why a plan is so important, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed? Why is a roadmap so crucial?
That's a great question. Without a plan, you're like a ship without a compass, just drifting. A time management plan gives you direction and purpose, helps you prioritize those goals, allocate time effectively, and track your progress. It's about taking control instead of letting time control you.
So it's about moving from reactive, constantly putting out fires, to proactive, intentionally designing your days and weeks.
Exactly. And the book lays out a really structured approach to creating a plan. It starts with your goals and breaks them down into those smaller, actionable steps.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are the key parts of a good time management plan, and how do we actually put it all together?
The book recommends starting with a good old-fashioned brain dump. Write down everything you need to do, everything you want to do, all your commitments, all your goals. Get it all out of your head and onto paper.
I like that. It's like clearing out the mental clutter to make space for the planning part.
Exactly. Once you have it all laid out, you can start prioritizing. Use the Eisenhower matrix, the ABCDE method, whatever resonates with you, to identify those tasks that are most important and urgent.
So putting those prioritization skills we just talked about to work.
Right. The book then goes into creating daily, weekly, and monthly plans. The daily plan is the foundation.
What are the key elements of a solid daily plan?
The book stresses focusing on your top 3 priorities for the day. Those are the must-dos. Write those down and commit to tackling them first thing in the morning.
Love that. Identifying those non-negotiables for each day.
Exactly. Then you can use a technique called time blocking, where you allocate specific time slots for each task. Instead of just having a long to-do list, you're actually scheduling when you'll work on each item.
So like creating a schedule for your day, just like you'd schedule meetings or appointments.
Precisely. And don't forget to include breaks in your plan to avoid burnout. The book even talks about the Pomodoro technique, where you work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. Helps you stay focused and refreshed.
The Pomodoro technique is a classic. I've tried it, and those short breaks really make a difference.
For sure. Now, on top of the daily plan, there are weekly and monthly plans.
Okay, let's talk about those. What's the purpose of a weekly plan, and how is it different from the daily plan?
The weekly plan is about seeing the bigger picture. Are you making progress towards your goals? It's about setting weekly goals, scheduling key tasks, and really importantly, balancing work and life. The book suggests prepping for the week ahead, maybe on Sunday evening, to review your schedule and make any adjustments.
It's like that bird's eye view of your week, making sure everything's aligned with your priorities.
Exactly. And then we have the monthly plan, which provides that long-term perspective.
Zooming out even further to see those bigger goals and milestones.
Precisely. You're reviewing goals, identifying those key milestones, and planning for flexibility. Because, let's face it, life rarely goes according to plan.
That flexibility is so important. I've tried to stick to super rigid plans in the past, and it just sets you up for feeling defeated when things inevitably change.
Exactly. And the book really stresses that these plans are guidelines, not chains. You need to adapt as you go, be flexible, adjust as needed.
That adaptability is so key for staying in control and not getting overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And remember, these plans are tools. They're there to serve you, not rule you.
Great overview of the planning process. I'm already feeling more organized just thinking about it. But before we move on to tools and techniques, what about your personal experience with planning? Has having a plan made a noticeable difference for you?
Oh, absolutely. Having a plan helps me feel so much more grounded and in control. It reduces that sense of overwhelm, helps me focus my energy on what matters. Plus, there's something so satisfying about checking things off a list and seeing those goals come to life.
I get that feeling of accomplishment. It's like having a map that guides you to your destination, making the journey smoother and less stressful.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's talk about some tools and techniques that can help us put all this into practice.
Okay, I'm ready to explore those. I've tried to rely on willpower alone in the past, and, well, let's just say it doesn't always work out so well.
Willpower is a finite resource.
Yeah.
We need all the help we can get. Luckily, there are tons of tools and techniques out there to support our time management efforts.
The book seems to acknowledge both digital and analog tools. What are some examples of each?
On the digital side, we've got task management apps like Todoist and Trello, calendar apps like Google Calendar, and even those focus apps that help block out distractions.
I'm a fan of those focus apps. Sometimes you need that extra nudge to stay on track.
They can be lifesavers. But don't underestimate the power of analog tools. The book also talks about planners, journals, and even sticky notes for visual organization.
I love that they acknowledge both approaches, because sometimes you just need a good old-fashioned pen and paper to get your thoughts straight.
Totally. The key is to find what works best for you and use those tools intentionally.
It's not about having the fanciest gadget or the most elaborate planner. It's about using the tools that help you stay organized and focused.
Exactly. Now, in addition to the tools, there are specific techniques for efficiency. We've already mentioned time blocking and the Pomodoro technique. Another one that's really interesting is mind mapping. It's a great way to brainstorm and organize your ideas visually.
I've heard of mind mapping, but how does it actually help with time management?
So mind mapping is all about visually organizing your thoughts. It's great for brainstorming, problem solving, and even planning projects. Helps you see the big picture and the connections between ideas. You can use it to break down a big project into smaller tasks, identify potential roadblocks, and create a visual roadmap.
Sounds really helpful, especially for visual learners.
Definitely. And the cool thing is you can use it with both digital and analog tools. There are apps for it, but you can also do it with pen and paper.
Another example of finding what works for you. So we've covered a lot in this first part. We explored the foundations of time management, debunked some myths, talked about different styles, learned how to prioritize tasks, set smart goals, create a plan, and even touched on some helpful tools and techniques. What's resonating with you the most so far?
For me, it's that emphasis on intentionality and awareness. It's not about doing more. It's about being deliberate about how we spend our time, making conscious choices that align with our values. The SMART goals framework and those prioritization techniques are so helpful for bringing structure and clarity.
Absolutely. Those are great takeaways. And it's important to remember, time management isn't about finding the perfect system and sticking to it religiously. It's about experimenting, adapting, and finding what works best for you as you grow and change.
It's an ongoing journey.
Well said. Now, before we move on to part 2, where we'll tackle procrastination, distractions, and staying motivated, let's leave our listeners with a little challenge. What's one small change you can make today to start using your time more effectively? Maybe it's setting a SMART goal, prioritizing your tasks, or trying one of the techniques we discussed.
It's all about taking action. Even small changes can add up over time.
Absolutely. So until next time, happy time managing. Welcome back to our deep dive into the art of time management. Last time, we laid the groundwork talking about goals and planning. Now, let's tackle a big one, procrastination.
Ugh, procrastination. The struggle is real, right? That feeling when you have a deadline staring you in the face, but you just can't seem to get started.
We've all been there. It's like a universal experience.
The book dives into the psychology of procrastination, exploring common culprits like fear of failure, perfectionism, and feeling overwhelmed.
Oh, those are all so familiar. Sometimes the fear of not doing something perfectly can be totally paralyzing.
Right. The book points out that procrastination isn't just about laziness or bad time management. It often stems from deeper emotional issues.
It's not just about willpower. There's more going on under the surface.
Exactly. And the book doesn't just point out the problem. It offers solutions. One strategy that really resonated with me is breaking down tasks into smaller steps.
Yes, that's something I found so helpful. It's
Yeah.
much easier to face a small, manageable step than a huge, daunting task.
Precisely. The book uses that analogy of eating an elephant. How do you do it? One bite at a time.
Love that analogy.
Right. Breaking down a big project into smaller chunks makes it feel less intimidating and more achievable.
When you focus on just that one small step, it takes the pressure off and helps you make progress without feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. And the book also talks about celebrating those small wins. Along the way, each step you complete is a victory.
It's like those small wins give you fuel to keep going, little rewards along the journey.
Absolutely. The book also introduces this idea called the 2-minute rule. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, just do it right away.
The 2-minute rule, I've heard about that. It's amazing how many things we put off that we could just knock out super quickly.
It's all about building momentum. Tackle those quick wins, and it creates a sense of accomplishment and frees up mental space for the bigger tasks.
And it stops those small tasks from piling up and becoming a bigger problem later.
Exactly. You mentioned consistency earlier. Well, the book really emphasizes deadlines, even self-imposed ones. They can make a big difference in staying on track.
Sometimes we need that external pressure, even if it's coming from ourselves, to stay motivated and accountable.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to get creative with those deadlines. Maybe challenge yourself to complete a certain number of tasks by a certain time, or even create a little competition with a colleague or a friend.
A little healthy competition can be fun. Now let's talk about distractions. They're everywhere these days.
Distractions, the bane of productivity. The book dedicates a whole chapter to managing those things that steal our focus.
They're everywhere. From those social media notifications to noisy environments to our own wandering minds, it's a constant battle.
The book really highlights the cost of distractions. They break our focus, slow us down, and lead to stress and frustration.
I know for me, when I get interrupted, it takes forever to get back on track. Like my train of thought completely derails.
The book makes a distinction between external and internal distractions.
Okay, let's break those down. What falls under external distractions?
So external distractions are things coming from outside of us. Think phone notifications, emails, noisy environments, interruptions from people.
Those are the things we can often control, or at least minimize, by making changes to our environment or setting boundaries.
Exactly. And then we have the internal distractions. Those can be trickier to handle.
What are some examples of those internal distractions?
Internal distractions are those thoughts and feelings that pull our focus away. Things like daydreaming, worrying, overthinking, or even physical discomfort like being hungry or tired.
Oh, yeah. Those internal ones can be tough. It's like your own mind is working against you.
The book offers some really practical strategies for dealing with both types.
Let's hear them. What are some ways to combat those external distractions?
For those external distractions, creating a dedicated workspace can make a big difference. It signals to your brain that it's time to focus. Turning off those notifications, especially for social media, is huge. And setting boundaries with people, letting them know when you need uninterrupted time, is so important.
Having a dedicated workspace really helps. It's like creating that mental separation between work time and personal time.
Exactly. Turning off those notifications can be so freeing. It lets you be present in your work without those constant pings and buzzes and those boundaries with people. Essential. Let them know when you're unavailable, when you need that focus time.
It's about protecting your time and energy. What about those internal distractions? Any tips for those?
For those internal distractions, the book suggests practicing mindfulness to stay present, writing down those intrusive thoughts to deal with later, and taking care of your physical needs, like staying hydrated and getting enough sleep.
It all ties back to that self-care piece. It's hard to focus when you're running on empty.
Absolutely. It's all connected. Now, what strategies have you found helpful for staying focused and minimizing distractions?
I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro technique. Those regular breaks really help me stay sharp, and I try to be intentional about scheduling time for those important but not urgent tasks like exercise and meditation to make sure I'm taking care of myself.
Those are great strategies. It's about finding what works for you and making it a habit.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, let's give our listeners a little challenge to tackle. Think about one distraction that consistently throws you off track. It could be your phone, social media, a noisy environment, or even your own thoughts. Once you've identified it, brainstorm one strategy from the book that you can use to minimize its impact. Even small changes can make a difference.
Love that challenge. It's all about taking action.
Now, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the book's strategies for staying motivated and productive over the long haul. It's about finding that inner drive that keeps you going even when things get tough.
We'll dig into those strategies and talk about how to create a sustainable approach to time management, one that supports your goals and enhances your well-being.
Stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive into the art of time management. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the art of time management.
We've covered a lot: taming procrastination, tackling those distractions, building a solid foundation.
Now it's time to talk about staying motivated. How do we keep that momentum going?
This chapter really gets to the heart of it, exploring both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
Understanding the difference between those two has been huge for me.
The book makes the point that while both types are important, it's that intrinsic motivation, the drive that comes from within, that's usually more sustainable in the long run.
It's about finding that sense of purpose and enjoyment in the work itself, not just relying on external rewards or pressure.
Exactly. Think about a hobby you love. You don't need deadlines or someone telling you to do it. You do it because you enjoy it.
It's true. And I love how the book emphasizes celebrating those small wins as a way to boost that intrinsic motivation.
Those small wins are like little boosts of energy. They remind you you're making progress and help you keep going even when it gets tough.
It's like giving yourself a little pat on the back. Now, the book also talks about creating a visual representation of your goals, like a vision board, right?
A vision board is a great way to keep those aspirations front and center. It's a tangible reminder of what you're working towards.
I love that. And it's not just about individual motivation. The book also talks about the power of surrounding yourself with positive influences, people who lift you up.
Having a supportive network is so important, especially when you're facing challenges or feeling discouraged. Those people can offer encouragement, accountability, even fresh perspectives.
It's like having a cheer squad in your corner. Now, you're a big advocate for routines. How does that tie into staying motivated and productive over the long term?
Routines are like the scaffolding for sustainable productivity. When you have consistent routines for your work, self-care, even downtime, you're creating a structure that supports your goals and reduces decision fatigue.
It's like automating those positive habits so you don't have to constantly rely on willpower.
Exactly. Willpower is limited. By establishing routines, you're setting yourself up for success.
And speaking of setting yourself up for success, the book also emphasizes taking care of your physical and mental health.
Right. You can't pour from an empty cup. Prioritizing sleep, good food, exercise, those are essential for keeping your energy and focus up.
It's all about that holistic approach, taking care of yourself so you can show up as your best self.
Absolutely. And the book also cautions against burnout, reminding us to schedule breaks and downtime to recharge and prevent overwhelm.
I think a lot of us feel guilty taking breaks, but the book makes it clear that those breaks are crucial for staying productive and creative.
It's like hitting the reset button, giving your mind and body a chance to refresh.
One thing that really stuck with me from this chapter was the importance of saying no.
Oh, that's a big one. Saying no is so important for protecting your time and energy, but it can be really hard, especially for people pleasers.
The book encourages us to be mindful of our commitments and to prioritize the things that truly align with our values and goals.
Saying no to something means saying yes to something else, something that's more important or fulfilling.
Now, as we move into the final chapter, which is all about continuous improvement, what are some key takeaways from this motivation chapter that you'll be applying in your own life?
For me, it's remembering to focus on intrinsic motivation, finding that joy in the work itself, and I'm definitely going to be more intentional about celebrating those small wins.
Those are great. And for me, it's that emphasis on routines and prioritizing self-care. When I'm taking care of myself, everything else flows better.
Okay, let's talk about that final chapter. It emphasizes that time management isn't a destination, it's a journey of continuous improvement.
It's not about finding that one perfect system and never deviating. Right.
Exactly. It's about being adaptable and refining your approach as your goals, priorities, and circumstances change.
So it's like a constant evolution.
Exactly. The book outlines a three-step process for continuous improvement: review, reflect, and adapt.
Okay, break that down for us.
First, you review your progress. Track your achievements. Compare them to the goals you set. Look for patterns. It's about gaining insights into what's working and what's not.
Gathering data on yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you move into the reflection stage. Ask yourself those key questions. What strategies were most effective? What challenges did you face? And how did you overcome them? Are there any habits holding you back?
Those are great questions to ask yourself. It's about honest self-assessment.
Exactly. And the book also emphasizes celebrating your successes, no matter how small.
Give yourself credit for the progress you've made.
Absolutely. And just as important as celebrating those successes is learning from mistakes. Instead of dwelling on setbacks, focus on what you can learn from them.
It's all about that growth mindset.
Right. And then, based on your review and reflection, you move into the adaptation phase.
Time to make some tweaks.
Exactly. You might refine your goals, adjust your schedule, try new tools or techniques, or even get feedback from others to gain fresh perspectives.
Taking those insights and turning them into action.
Precisely. And the book highlights the importance of regular check-ins to stay on track.
Like those daily, weekly, monthly reviews we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Those regular check-ins help you stay accountable and make sure you're moving in the right direction.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the art of time management. It's been a great exploration full of practical advice and strategies for taking control of our time and creating a life that feels more balanced and fulfilling.
This book gives us a whole toolbox of